Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, August 15th, Monday, August 16th, for those of you across the pond and beyond. Welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you guys could join us this evening. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and I hope you guys had an awesome week and a rockin' weekend so far. My week has been interesting, awesome. I missed the show last night. Thank you so much, Mr. Diecast Dave, for doing my show for me last night. I greatly appreciate that you did that because I really hate doing replays. I hate for people to have to listen to the same things repeatedly. So thank you so much, Diecast Jay, for doing that. And that is Jay from Diecast in Racers. He actually races Hot Wheel cars and Matchbox cars, and it's super interesting. So if you're joining us tonight, you can hear us live at Spreaker.com. You can also find us on KPNL Radio, which is at KPNL-DB.com. We're also found, if you want to look us up in the meantime, or listen to the show later on if you're interrupted, you can find us on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, as well as Podcast Chaser. And I finally got it fixed, so we're up on Facebook as well. So tonight, we will be talking about the importance of being mindful of one's emotions and perceptions, especially now that the world, as we know it, was going back into normalcy, but it seems like we're going back into the whole Delta variant issue there. So it's kind of like a roller coaster, which life a lot of times is. So tonight is a great opportunity if you'd like to call in 970-335-9596 or go to our chat room in Spreaker.com under We Are Paradox Media to talk about or ask questions about how to manage all of these emotions, including depression and possibly even social anxiety after being in the comfort of our own homes, being on lockdown, and kind of being in a world that, I don't know, we've never really been in before. But we have Dr. Myke Merrill in, and he has been a pastor of a local church in one town for 40 years. And he graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and Philosophy and a minor in Psychology. He also has a Master's of Divinity degree from Asbury Theological Seminary with academic honors. So after 2 years as an associate, he and his growing family located in Hilton, New York, and are still based there. He learned a Doctor of Ministry degree from Northeastern Seminary with his dissertation, The 5 Basic Emotions, a New Systems Approach. So, seizing on a wide variety of opportunities, he taught as an adjunct instructor in a local college for 29 years, directed religion and national youth programs for 20 years, owned a restaurant for 7 years, and he wrote 22 books and training manuals. I'm just thinking to myself, out of all these things, the most horrific thing to me sounds like the restaurant business. So he has traveled extensively to train others across the United States, and he is currently co-owning a school system in Honduras. Oh my gosh, Myke. Dr. Myke Merrill. That is amazing. You have accomplished so much.
Wow, I am so impressed with that guy. The way you read all that accomplishments is really impressive.
I know. Does it make you feel good inside?
It's also very funny because when I wrote all that, it's tidbits that have happened over the last 45 years, and I was able to cherry pick all of the great celebrations and leave out all the junk that actually makes me who I am.
That is so true. I shared something on Facebook just this last week, and it says, this person looks very perfect and all these things look amazing on the outside, but you don't really see all the threads that tie together to make these perfect stitches within their lives. So there's all kinds of loose threads and crazy things going on in the background. But that's what bios are about. You have to cherry pick and highlight things. Yeah.
Very true. I'm glad to be on your show, Tessa.
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm super excited because I think what we're going to talk about tonight can touch so many lives and help a lot of people to figure out what the heck is going on. Sometimes it's hard. Some people have not been in situations like this or had certain traumas, and this is really a trauma to all of us. So I'm so grateful you're here. And I think everything happens for a reason, and I'm so grateful to Michelle for introducing us.
That's good. She's a great publicist for us.
She definitely is. So, what made you decide to get into the field of helping people?
Because people need help.
Right.
I grew up in a very normal American family, which has a broad set of dysfunctions and was very successful in aspects of life back in the 1950s, 1960s. And I finally left to go to college in the 1970s. So those are my growing up years, the beginning of rock and roll and all the classic stuff that happened coming out of the happy days of the 50s and the Vietnam War years of the 60s. So in my family, let me back up just a little bit. My mother died when I was 15. There were 5 children in my family.
Oh my.
My father remarried within a few months. My stepmother had 5 children also. And so there were 10 of us.
The Brady
boyfriends,
Bunch.
Girlfriends, more than that. It was really insane. There was 10.
Yeah.
And then friends, and we had an American Field Service student from Chile, and people were coming and going. And it gave me the chance to observe a very wide swath of humanity across the spectrum. And then from there, I just became incessantly curious about people. The book that I have out on Amazon now is called Why Do People Act That Way? And What Can I Do About It? And the title really was a question that arose on the lips of people that I have heard all my life. Why does somebody do this? Somebody cut you off in traffic. What in the world do they do that for? As a matter of fact, you and I were talking before the show started about some mischief that happened at the state fair. And one of your spontaneous questions was, I can't imagine why people do that. I mean, why would they do that? And that question arises continuously. So people, it's not just merely a theoretical question. People ask it legitimately and don't really know how to put into words what they're thinking about others' behavior and, much more importantly, about their own. And so I began observing and listening to how people phrased their own sense of self and their understanding of what was going on around them. I learned how to ask really good questions that weren't just trivial, but it allowed a person to begin exploring what was going on as they perceived the world and wrestled with trying to figure that out. And so as I got into more counseling and pastoral work and visiting and engaging both as a worker and as a leader, I began to formulate some understandings of how human beings experience the world around them and what their part is in that world. And that's how I help people resolve incredibly complex situations, traumas that go back decades in their lives, momentary afflictions and conflicts that arise from a day to day, because now they have the tools not only to think clearly about it, but they have the language to get somewhere in that thinking.
Yeah, and it's amazing. A lot of people, a lot of us can get through our traumas, and sometimes you hit a wall. Like, there's that
Yep.
one straw that breaks the camel's back, and then it's like
Yep.
you don't know how to fix yourself this time, and it's so good to have an outside outlet or somebody there to help you or give you the tools to work through these certain situations. And I don't know, I'm just so grateful for that, and for you once more. But yeah, it's so important for us, and I say this after every show, like, if we work together, we can get through this, and we'll be stronger together if we raise each other up and help each other through this. But traumas in the past and even traumas today are so significant, and sometimes, like you said, there's traumas in life that we either work through or maybe we suppress them. And then later on, they might rear their ugly heads because we didn't exactly deal with them the way we should have. So,
Correct.
I saw that you're a pastor. You have been for 40 years. That is amazing. And just your work with the youth, to me, like, that's where it really starts. And that's where, if you get in there in the nitty gritty when they are in that portion of life, it can really help them in their adulthood. But have you always been a religious person, or at some certain point in your life, did you feel like you had to seek it out?
That's a really interesting question. Words really matter. I wouldn't say I'm very, very religious at all. However, if somebody else looked at my life and said, "So do you pray a lot?" Well, the answer is yes, I do. Do you read the Bible? I do that. Do you go to worship services or all the kinds of things that have to do with religion? I would say, sure, I do. But I don't see myself as religious really at all. I see myself as spiritually connected. I really understand my perspective of what's going on in the world. I didn't grow up in a family that had any kind of religious structure to it at all. My mother was Jewish. My father was an atheist in his description.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't have any training, so I didn't go to synagogue. I didn't have a bar mitzvah. I didn't wear a yarmulke. There was none of the trappings of Judaism. We were secular, quite wealthy, very well endowed people, educationally, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, socially. All that stuff was a part of the mix of our family. The struggle in our version of Judaism, this is not true of all Jews, but it was true of our family, that if you are healthy, wealthy, and wise, that's God's blessing. And if you're sick and ill and poor, then that's God's curse. Aww. And so as long as you're healthy, wealthy, and wise, you're in the apple of God's eye. And when those things fail, you have come under God's curse. So my mother, in her family, was the only one that developed. We're Ashkenazi Jews. We have BRCA2 failure of our genetic code. And she developed cancers in keeping with that condition. They didn't, in the 60s, they didn't really know quite what to do. They did everything they could, surgery, radiation, all that treatment, didn't work. And she went from a 38-year-old healthy, 150-pound, vibrant woman with 5 kids to a 70-pound skeleton 4 years later.
Oh my
gosh.
I
watched her die.
Yeah.
I was in there. My dad was a drinker, and I was in the room when something happened. Your show is really focused on paranormal. I would say this is really normal. It's really the most normal thing, because every human being that has a soul is going to die, and that soul will leave the body, the tent, the house, and depart. So that's really, really normal, but it's often called the paranormal or alongside the normal. So I was in the room studying. I was 15 years old, and the only way I've ever been able to, these are only words that describe an event, but not the event itself. I felt like somebody got up and walked out of the room, but it was only me and my mother on machines. She had been unconscious for 7 days, and we were just waiting for her to die or pull the plug on the machine. We didn't know what to do. And I felt like somebody got up in the room and walked out. And I was left with that feeling someone just departed. But I'm only 15 years old, and I have no religious training at all, so I didn't immediately think, oh, her soul just left her body or something spiritual happened. I didn't have any idea of that. And so a nurse came in to check the machines, and the nurse said to me, your mother probably just died. And I said, what are you talking about?
That is, oh my gosh. She needs to work on her approach.
Well, this is 1968, so it's, we're talking ancient history here. And she's just and I had been in watching my mother struggle to stay alive numerous times over that week, and she had had many surgeries, so they knew who I was. This is not some random person that just never seen me before. And I'm a fairly astute 15-year-old. I wasn't just some dumb kid sitting there. So she said, your mother probably just died. And I said, well, I don't know what that means. And she said, that was probably her soul leaving her body. Some people can perceive that, and some people can't. I've been a nurse a long time. And I found, as a pastor, I've been with about 70 people when they've died, and some family members have a very clear perception of something. Mm-hmm. They may not put it into words, but they have a sense, and other people don't. They don't at all. So there's no scientific formula. We can't take somebody and kill them and then say, okay, who sensed that? You can't do science on that stuff. You can observe, but you can't test it. You can't test the theory. So anyway, so I was left with this question. I was just so curious about what happened. I wasn't sad. I was actually quite happy. And when other family members were all overcome with grief and my mother's dying and, I'm so sorry for your loss and all those things. And I'm responding by saying, it wasn't a loss. This is wonderful. And
she's not hurting anymore. She's not suffering. The prison her soul was in, this body that didn't work and was extremely painful, she's been released from that. And so I didn't have the words to describe what I was thinking and feeling, what I was perceiving. I didn't have language for that. Mm-hmm. So it was several years that I struggled to even have a framework in my mind to be able to think about. I could recall the experience, but I couldn't put it into words. And so over that next couple of years, I was inquiring of everybody on everything, my teachers, counselors, friends of my parents of my friends, my own peer group. Very few people wanted to even talk about it. And those who didn't have good language to be able to describe even what they thought about it. It was quite interesting to me as an emerging adolescent. And eventually a friend of mine who went to church said the real critical issue is, did Jesus rise from the dead or didn't he? He died, and so either he stayed dead or he didn't stay dead. There's only two options logically. And you have to decide, does resurrection happen? Is there something after life, or is there nothing after life? That's the question. And she didn't answer it for me. She just said, think about that. So that became really the launch, the trajectory into where my faith came alive. But I wouldn't say I was religious about it. It's not. I didn't launch into religion. I didn't start going to church and wearing different clothing and having a different language base. I worked through those issues of reality and spirituality and time, and that's really tough for a kid to think about. And so that really became the foundation of where I am today. And that was 50 years ago, so 52. So that's how I got to where I am. Yeah, that's awesome. I can totally relate with you. I lost my mom to a drunk driver, and she was actually on machines for a little while, and I was 5, almost 6 when she passed away. But I mean, everything seems so clear to me. Okay, so I felt guilty for the longest time because, like you said, at her funeral, instead of being sad for her and everything, me and my little brother were happy. We were playing, and I felt bad, like maybe I should have been somber and weeping, and there was many years of that, missing her and weeping over the loss of her, not for her, but for me, for the loss of her for me. But like you said, she was free of that vessel, that prison that held her in there and caused all those issues and pain. Later on, I found out during her autopsy, they found several different cancers. But yeah, after she passed, it sent me on the path to figure out, why are we here? Where do we go when we're gone? And I'm only 6, so I'm going to different churches with different people. And even when I went into the military, I was baptized LDS at the age of 8, I think. I was a year late for them. But the age of 8, and then at 15, after that, I was off and on. But when I went into the military, like, every religion was at my fingertips. So I'm just looking for answers from every religion, even though I had had many paranormal experiences, which to me is normal, and what really is normal. But I don't, like you, I don't feel like I've ever really been a religious person. I do know my scripts, I know what's in there, but otherwise I'm a spiritual person, and I can find God in anything around me, especially my kids. But it's an amazing process. Man. And you call it
very much is. And what?
Go ahead.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, when you describe you should have felt guilty, or you did feel guilty because you should have felt sadness, but your natural state was to accept what had happened and to incorporate it with some measure of joy, but the adults around you would impose an entirely different result
exactly
from your own perceptions, and
which puts that guilt on you.
Which creates that sense of fear and being unsettled and not being confident in how you are perceiving and putting things together. And it was really out of all of that stuff that I developed the working theory that I have of the 5 basic emotions. And so it helps people be able to have some simple tools to at least begin thinking about what they feel and why they feel it and what to do with it.
Yeah, and it's funny how you said that. I didn't feel guilty until I, kind of did a rewind. I remember how people were looking at me, what I was feeling from them, being empathic, and feeling that I should feel bad for what I'm doing. I should be sad right now. And like I said, I was sad for many years. My mom wasn't there. But yeah, that was their feeling or impression upon me that made me feel that way. So I would love it if you would tell us how to get through this. The five, what did you call it again? The 5 emotional systems?
The 5 basic emotional systems.
Okay.
When I was in college, I was a good student. I worked really hard. There's one of the principles of my life is, I call it, pick your nose carefully.
Right.
It's a principle of living, because if you're good at what you do, you're going to be asked to do so many things that it will drive your life crazy. So you have to learn how to say no very well. Pick your nose carefully so that you can pick your yeses more carefully. And
That's
the
awesome.
challenge that often people have is that their lives simply scatter. It's time to do homework. You can't stay focused on that for 1 hour. You want to go out and play Frisbee. It's a nice day. So you just scatter your life instead of keeping it focused. And so learning how to say no to the things that either interrupt or destroy your life, and to say yes to the things that build up or strengthen your life, is really a principle. I call it the pick your nose principle. So learning how to say no, and especially if you're good. If you're not any good, nobody's going to ask you to do stuff. They're not going to do it because you're not really good at anything. It's when you really have capability, you're adept you are skillful, you actually accomplish what you set out to do, more and more people will say, hey, I know you're busy, but can you help me with this? Can you take on that? Can you do this project? Can you go to this job? And if you say yes, and yes, and yes, I don't want to disappoint anybody. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes.
I'm a
you
people
find
pleaser.
out you have no time. You're scattered all the way through. And so the principle for you, Tessa, is learn how to pick your nose carefully. Anyway.
That's one of my favorite lines.
So
you can pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your friend's nose. Unless you have a really close friend that'll allow you to do that. But yes, pick it carefully because me as a people pleaser, I go above and beyond. I'm trying to do whatever I can for anybody, and I do it so well, they ask more and more and more, like you said. You have to learn to say no. And for people like us, it's really hard.
Learn how. It is very hard for people pleasers to say no. And that's why I say pick your nose carefully, because in my orientation of life, it's easy for me to say no. But I'm not a people pleaser. For you, now I'm a task-oriented person. So give me a challenge, I'm going to say yes almost every single time, because I love the challenge of a task. You love the relationships with people. And so everybody has something that they have a hard time saying no to. The pick your nose carefully is to be able to learn the skill of saying no, even to good things. It's easy to say no to bad things, but it's very hard to say no to good things that are not the best things. And so being able to say yes to the best allows you a much greater freedom in what you're trying to do. So when I went through college and graduate school, I studied to become a clinical psychologist. That was my secondary. I was going to be a mathematician to begin with, but I decided to go into clinical psychology. And I found that clinical psychology has tremendous benefit. There's nothing wrong with clinical work. But for me, I didn't want to have to charge for my services. I could do pro bono work, but I just didn't want that money issue to be a factor. I didn't want the limitation of having to work in a clinic. I wanted to be able to be free to go to prisons or go to hospitals or into a home at 3 o'clock in the morning and not have the restrictions that come with clinical work.
Or even saying, you are a name or a person, you're not a number to me. Because a lot of people feel like numbers in that situation.
And they do. And there are counselors that find that kind of situation very safe and the structure is really helpful to them. But
I get it now.
I found it disabling to me.
Yeah, it puts that barrier.
So going into pastoral ministry, that allowed me to be anywhere, anytime, do anything for anybody without any charge whatsoever. And I could provide support, counseling, guidance, intervention, whatever it was I needed to do. My particular specialty was working with young people and working with the staff that was working with adolescents. And the reason I had for that is if you want to manage the world, work with adults, they've already made their main commitments. Their lives are fairly well set. They can change, but it's extremely difficult. But all of the life decisions, whether you're going to drink or not, use drugs or not, how much money you want to earn, what your education is going to be, who you're going to marry, where you're going to live, all those decisions are made in adolescence between 12 and 25. And so if you want to change the world, work with adolescents. If you want to manage the world, work with adults. So I specialized in working with young people. And what's very interesting is a very young child from age 2 or 3 to 10 has very few words for emotions. They have very few words for their perceptions. They have very few words for their actions. But by the time they're adults, they have many words. So they have to learn all that during the period of time from 10 or 12 up to 25 or 30. So that gave me the opportunity of shaping their worldview in the thousands of young people by running conferences and doing training and writing and training people how to use those materials to affect young people, that became really the entryway into the concepts that I have now. I teach it to all age groups across all professions around the world. I really teach around the world with this. So the 5 emotions, let's go to the 5 emotions. I think people have hundreds of words for emotions, and they'll often say, I don't even know what I'm feeling. I can't put into words. So I developed a concept that emotions group into 5 spectrums or 5 systems. And there are mild words, there are moderate words, and there are intense words in all 5. The 5 are these. I call them acceptance, exposure, empowerment, depletion, and celebration. Those are the 5 systems. Acceptance is love. It's to draw something towards yourself. It's at a low level, I like it. I'm curious. I'm interested. At a moderate level, I love it. I'm bonded to it. I really connected. I cherish that. At an extremely high level, I crave it. I'm obsessed with it.
I can't live without it.
I can't live without it. Yeah. And that passion is, I'm going to have this no matter what it takes. So it's love that crushes the butterfly instead of sets it free. So the difference between craving something and liking something is one of degree. It's not a different emotion. It's a different intensity of acceptance. The second one I call exposure. At a mild level, it's being shy or feeling uncomfortable. At a moderate level, it'll be feeling frightened or guilty or anxious. At an extremely high level, it's being ashamed or terrified or phobic. And the difference between terror
feeling
and
like your life is in danger,
butterflies, is degree of intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a person is feeling a loss of safety or they're feeling insecure, the emotions that go with that quest for safety and security are exposure emotions. When a person feels exposed, those feelings, whether mild or intense, are what they're experiencing, right? That's how you describe it. What's interesting is with a very young child, you can say to them, are you afraid? Lightning strikes, big thunder boom. Are you afraid? They're crying, they're clinging to you. You pat them on the back and you say, you're afraid, but it's okay. I'm here. You're safe. That's the answer for fear is safety and security. Mm-hmm. But if you said, so are you feeling slightly agitated right now?
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, they're going to look at you and they can't understand that word. Are you embarrassed right now? Are you feeling a little ashamed? Those words don't mean anything because they haven't learned that language yet. Mm-hmm. They understand. Are you afraid? Are you very afraid? Are you really very afraid? And then you might add another word. Are you terrified? Are you petrified? And the child hears those words and then begins to incorporate them into their understanding of exposure. So exposure is about fear. The third one I call empowerment. And empowerment was the hardest system for me to name because empowerment is seen as people in our culture that have been disempowered need to rise up and be able to seize their opportunities and become very empowered.
Yeah, you feel like somebody is taking your power and you go in and you take your power back.
So that is the area that includes anger, resentment, frustration, rage, boredom. At a mild level, it's being miffed or being upset or annoyed. At a very intense level, it's being enraged or violent or out of control. And the difference between rage and anger and frustration and annoyance is a degree of intensity. And they're all oriented around bringing about change. If you have young children, or teenage children, and you say, get ready for bed, and they go, uh-huh, and they don't move. You might be great with that. And then you say again, 5 minutes later, I told you, you have now an edge in your voice. I told you it's time to go to bed. Okay, I'm going, and they don't move. And so now your annoyance has become frustration, and it's up. And your frustration, you now have a gravelly sound in your voice. I told you to go to bed. And then the child, okay, I'm going, just shut up. And the talk back makes you more intensely empowered.
Right.
You're getting angry, and you slap something. You're not going to get out of your chair yet. You slap something, make a big noise, stomp your
Clap
feet
your
on the
hands.
floor,
Yeah.
and start yelling and say, I've just about had it with you. I want you to get up and go to bed right now. And you start emphasizing all your words. And they say, okay. And they don't move. And then finally, you blow your top and you get out of your chair and you go stomping across the floor. They leap up, jump upstairs, get in their bed. And the change that you wanted happened. And it can be clean their room, put gas in the car, fix dinner, clean up your dishes. Doesn't matter what the topic is.
Brush your damn teeth. Nobody wants to smell that.
Right. But the issue is you want change. You want power. You want control. You want somebody to respond to your demand, and they're not doing it. So you become more angry. It intensifies until you're able to gain the power you want, or you're engaged in a battle. And so I call that empowerment. That whole system, I call it empowerment.
Well, for me, it's funny because, I'm pretty free-flowing. I'm a sort of fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants sort of gal because, I don't know, I feel like life is easier that way. And then my husband's like, okay, these kids need to be in bed at this time, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, you guys put away what you're doing. You got to go brush your teeth. And then you got to go to bed. Are you hungry? Because before you brush your teeth, I got to make sure you're fed so you don't have to do it again. And every time when they go to bed, they always get up, I'm starving, I'm so hungry. So I'll make them food. But I feel like I'm trying to enforce somebody else's will. Like, for me, you go to bed when you do. Like, as a kid, for me, I sometimes didn't even sleep. I'd go to sleep at certain times. I had what I call paranormal PTSD. So I didn't sleep a lot, still went to school, did really, really good. Go home, do your own thing, go to bed, maybe get a few hours of sleep, whatnot. But brushing your teeth is important. It's part of your health. Mm-hmm. Being full and fed is important because you can't sleep if you're hungry. And, I don't know, my husband always feels like it's an excuse for them to stay up. But I remember going to bed and being hungry and wanting to eat and nobody would feed me. Feed the kid. Then they'll sleep better. I don't know.
Sure. So in a family, one parent can take a power structure approach and the other one takes a powerless structure approach. And it's very interesting to watch that dynamic happen. And as long as both of you are good with the way the other one is approaching it, then your family is going to work very functionally.
I have to say, what's funny to me is I'm a Marine. I am structurally sound. I, make a chart for chores. I have rules. I have all this other stuff. Like, all this other stuff does not seem to matter until it's like, when they want it at that point. Time to go to bed. Time to brush your teeth. Do this. But otherwise, it's like everything else is out the window. So I'm generally the one that's structurally sound, like, do this, this, this. Like, this is how we can have a normal, functional life. But it's just kind of out the window. When I ground somebody, do a punishment, whatnot, it seems like it's out the window. Otherwise, like, I don't know. It seems like when I try to put it down, it doesn't work. But when he puts it down, that's when it really works, because I back him up maybe and he doesn't back me up, because when I ground the kids he's like, oh well.
I don't know how your family works. I'm not stalking you and spying on you.
No.
What's interesting is
saying
when your husband makes a statement, he will follow it up with action almost immediately every time. And when you make a statement, you won't follow it up with action. you'll waver or negotiate an outcome. And if your husband says, I told you to go to bed, he walks over, turns off the technology, turns off the lights, they go to bed because he said so.
No, it's totally opposite.
They're really the opposite. You're the one who does that.
I'm the one that gets up. I'm the one that's doing things, and he's the one holding down the couch, basically, a.k.a. laying on it. So he'll be saying things, looking at his phone, scrolling, looking at his phone, saying things, scrolling, and I'm the one that gets up and says things, but he's the one that buys gifts. He's the one that does all these other fun things and other things, and I'm the one that's like, this is how it needs to be, this is how we can be structurally sound, and I'm the one that gets up and says things, but he comes in behind me and says, oh, well, I know your mom grounded you, but I feel like you should be off grounding right now, so this and this and that and that. So that's when it comes to, two bulls, heads together, what's going to happen? Do you let it go?
But what he's doing is he's using the fifth emotional system where you're using the third one. Let me go through the other two. Empowerment is the third one. The fourth one I call depletion. And at a mild level, it's being tired or hungry or feeling blue, having a bad day. At a moderate level, it's feeling grief or being sad, being feeling wounded, being hurt. At an extremely intense level, it's being overwhelmed, feeling exhausted, feeling blank, just coming to an end. You've reached your end. Right. Depletion is about finding rest or recovery. It's about having empty tanks and finding ways of refreshing or refilling your life. It's a quest for healing. And then the fifth one I call celebration. Celebration is joy, it's happiness, it's having a good day, feeling good, up to ecstasy and enthusiasm and delight and all that kind of stuff. What's interesting is if your husband is saying, hey, let's just have some fun here. Let's perk everything up. Let's go for the roller coaster ride. That has to do with celebration, which has its own set of rewards. And when you're using empowerment and he's using celebration, your kids are going to say, am I going to follow the rules or am I going to go have fun?
Yeah,
and the answer is, that's not hard for me to figure out.
No, not at all. Exactly.
Which is a different emotional system. Yep,
it's so counterproductive for me. I'm just like, this is not working and my whole world is falling apart. And it's funny because, lifelines as far as your grandparents, your parents, things flow downhill. If your mom's an enabler, like his was, he's an enabler. And so, he's got that sort of thing going on, and I've got the people pleaser thing, but I have learned to say no. Even though it was so hard for me to say at first, I was like, getting anxiety about it. How do I say no? How do I say no? And then finally saying it. But with my kids, it's different because I want them to grow and be strong individuals and know what's right and wrong and be able to take care of themselves. If you don't make them learn these certain aspects in their life, they're not going to learn it till they're adults. Like, what sort of functional process is that? I really don't get it. But yeah, it's intriguing.
When my wife and I started out having children back in the late 70s, we were finished with our education, going into our first employment, full-time employment. Our first son was born in 1978. And as we,
me too.
We get all the family parenting magazines and all that stuff. We read all that stuff about how to discipline and when do you spank your child? Do you not spank your child? Do you reward your child? When do you give them allowance? All the books on that stuff. None of it made sense to us.
Right.
Because it didn't have a theme. There wasn't like an end product that really works. So my wife and I, as we do a lot of training, and of course adolescents have a tendency to grow up and they get married and they want me to do their wedding and then they have babies and then they start their households and they want me to coach them and walk them through. So over a 10-year period, kids that I worked with are becoming young adults. And as we began to develop, rather than buy other people's stuff, I have always been a writer and a researcher. So I write my own materials and I refine it with things that other people have written. I'm not totally disinterested in that, but I want to be able to think things through, word them my own way, and then teach my material as opposed to somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, and I like to read everybody's stuff, and I can agree, I can disagree, I can discertain, like, what I will observe or, let soak in, and what I'll get rid of. Some things I agree with, some things I don't.
We had this little baby boy, and the question that we had as we hold him in our arms is, what are we going to do with this thing? This child, this human being, it's pooping and vomiting. It coos and it looks really cute, but it's growing really, really fast.
Yes.
And what are we actually supposed to do as parents? So we actually phrased what we believe was the end goal of parenting. And the end goal is not to have obedient children. It is to raise successful adults. No, it's to raise successful adults while they're in our homes growing up. Now, they may choose to be a free spirit person or buckle down. They may want to be the commander in the Marine Corps, and they may want to see the world on their own and be a hippie. The issue is not what are the structures of your life, but what are your internal resources to be an adult as you define success. So we have 4 children. We took on a foster daughter who became our daughter. We have 5 children. We raised them to be successful adults. Now, here comes an issue. A farmer comes up to my house with my 10-year-old son, my oldest son, grabbed him by the hair and the nape of his neck. Well, let's finish the story. He comes along, and he has this farmer guy, I knew who he was, down the road from me, with my son with his grip of hair and the back of the nape of his neck, and the farmer is beet red mad and says, "This is your son?" I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "He destroyed my corn." And I said, "Can you tell me more specifically what you're talking about?" I'm as calm as can be. My son, Matt, is just terrified. And this farmer is just spitting angry. "He destroyed my corn. He and his friend had knocked it all down." And I said, "Could you let his hair go while we're talking about this?" And he let my son's hair go. And I thought, okay, we're going to get through this okay. So I said, "So tell me what he did." And eventually the farmer said, they were building some kind of a fort in my cornfield and knocked a whole bunch of corn down, pulled it out by the roots, and were building like walls for a playhouse in the middle of the cornfield. And I turned to Matt and I said, "Did you do that?" And he goes, "I did." And I said, "Was it cool?" And the farmer's like, "What?" And Matt said, "It's really cool." I said, "Okay." So I said to the farmer, "How much corn did he actually knock down?" And the farmer then was like, probably 40 plants. I said, "So you have maybe 10,000 plants in that field. He knocked down 40 of them. How much would that cost you? How much is 40 corn plants?" And the farmer's like, well, $5 or $10. I said,
I never thought of it that way.
You're going to pay him $5 or $10. Let's make it 20. And this is back in 1985, 88 or whatever. And Matt goes, "Okay." So the farmer goes, "You're going to pay for the corn you wrecked?" And Matt said, "Yeah, I have to do that. I didn't think about it. I just didn't even think about it. We were having fun." And the farmer goes, "Well, it's field corn, so I'm just going to chop it up in my silage and put it in the..." I guess I didn't really lose anything. It just made me mad that you were in the field doing it.
Disrespecting.
And then the farmer goes to Matt. "So, you built walls with the corn?" And he said, "Yeah, it was really cool." And he goes, "I never even looked at that." I said, "He'll pay you $20. That's fair." And so by the time we were done, he had calmed right down. But the issue, so then somebody asked me later, so did you punish Matt? I said, why? What would I punish him for? For knocking the corn down. What's the consequence for knocking the corn down? Pay the farmer for what he lost. We did that.
Yeah,
how
whether
many
it's
more consequences? But how many more consequences should there be for? He's a 10-year-old kid. He doesn't understand no trespassing, and he was out having fun on a summer day with some corn that was 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
So he needed to learn boundaries. I understand that, but he didn't need other consequences than paying for it and apologizing to the farmer and explaining what he was doing. And by the time we were done, the farmer was really impressed with these kids. They weren't just knocking corn down and creating havoc. They were building something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's cool. So, like, maybe the farmer thought about, like, how did he use that to build something? And I was wondering, like, how exactly did he pay for it? Was it through money or service? Or was it through giving this farmer knowledge of building these buildings out of corn?
Yeah, he did that too, but he also went out and mowed the lawn 4 times and earned $5 each time, and paid the farmer $20.
That's so
and
awesome.
What's interesting is, as an adult, my goal was not punish my child and make him obey me. My goal was to have my son become a successful adult. What is a successful adult? When you take an action and there's a consequence, you accept both the privilege and the consequence equally. That is what it means to be an adult. And he learned part of that lesson on that day. So my goal was not to punish him, if I take away his technology, what does that teach him about 12-foot tall corn plants in the middle of a field? Nothing. Right. It's a totally separate issue altogether.
Void. Yeah.
However, what he learns from this is people who are working hard at growing corn get very angry when you go in and wreck it, and there's a cost to doing that. That is an adult lesson. And so all 4 of my kids, and my foster daughter as well, we never imposed, like they would come home with a D- in some course.
Right.
And they would say, am I going to be grounded? We never grounded our children, ever. Never once. Because grounding is totally separate from the actual consequence that they will learn. If they get a D- in a subject, they're just ignorant about it. So the question, then what I do is, let's say it's in American history. So for the next 6 months, I will be dropping hints about something Thomas Jefferson said or something that happened in Ben Franklin's life or whatever. He'd say, do you know what happened in Ben Franklin's life? No. This really,
I remember
really
he
cool.
flew that kite with a key on it and he got shocked a little bit, but that's all I remember.
But he invented bifocals and he came up with a design for a flying machine. And they're like, that's really? Awesome. I didn't know that. I said, well, okay. So then I would whet their appetite for learning American history so that when they went back for remedial courses or whatever, it wasn't like you're being punished, I'm going to take your phone away. It is, I want to tell you why I love learning this stuff. And now they realized if I don't do my homework or I don't apply myself here, I'm only hurting myself. Because if I want to know this stuff, I want to be able to have these interesting anecdotes. I want to know what's happening in history. When I pick up, a glass, who invented glass to begin with? I mean, how do we even know how to do that stuff? So
I know, that's pre-nuclear bomb even. It's like people actually figured this out, pre-nuclear bomb. How did they know? How did they do that? Right. I don't know, but it's pretty cool.
But that's science. So I invest in my children the desire to learn rather than a punishment for not learning.
Well, and I just have to say, when I say punishment, it's not like to punish them or hurt them. It's for them to learn. Just like I was telling you about how the barn got flooded. I told these 2, basically teenagers, they just turned 18 basically, and they're supposed to watch the back of the barn. I'm watching the front. if you had been there watching the back, and I told you on the way in, you can go on a round on the cart and check things out for 20 minutes. Then you have to come back to your post, wait at least 30 minutes, and then go on another round for 20 minutes. They did not do that. And then the barn got flooded. We had to do all this extra work. And then I started doing all the shoveling, and I'm like, you know what, Joe? Guess what? You're going to come over here, and you're going to be the one to shovel this out. So you can think about your actions and what you did and what happened due to you not doing the actions you should have. So it's not like, okay, you take things away for them to learn a certain, if you mess up, things will be taken away. Well, guess what happened? If we don't take care of this right now, these poor little sheep are going to die because they're going to get pneumonia because we're allowing them to stay in a wet bed. And even the county fair board people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys took out the wet bedding and put in fresh. That's not your job at all. Well, had we not done that, these poor little sheep would have died, and that would have been on us because you guys were not there doing your job. Now we have to pay. And it's not like...
And so a real consequence is you have those two kids sit down and you put a sick lamb, a wet lamb in their lap and say, I don't know if this lamb is going to live or die, but I want you to hold on to this animal until we know what's going to happen. This is the consequence of your action. And you can scream and rant and rave all you want. They'll just blow you off. Holding that lamb, they will never forget that. As long as they live, they will never forget that. And that's what becomes an adult lesson. That becomes part of adulthood.
Exactly. So I was so glad because my daughter Nova, who worked with me last night, and my nephew Joe, they're only a month apart. They're basically twins, and they've been so close all their whole life. And Nova's like, Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know this would happen. Had I known this would happen, I would not have done that. Well, now you know. This is why I asked you to do this job. This is why I asked you to only go out for 20 minutes at the most and come back. And she's like, I get it now, and I'm so sorry that I did not do that. So I think they both learned a lesson. And luckily, we were able to take the steps to keep bad things from happening, because I'd hate for them to hold that sick and dying lamb. Instead of that, we worked against that and kept that from them. But on that note,
that's very good.
We do have to go to our first music break. On this break, we have Miss McKaylin Hay, who she just recently graduated from high school. She's from Ontario, Canada, and she is an amazing musical artist. If you guys want to check her out on YouTube. She's even got music videos going on. But she's going to be singing Collapse, Nothing But Blood, Close, Devil You Know, as well as Fred Johnson III from Canyon County, California with Sugar. You guys don't go back. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Cool.
gas, gas. Yeah, we're gonna crash. How is this gonna last when we always collapse? Yeah, we're going too fast, 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 fast. Get your foot off the gas, 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 gas. Yeah, we're gonna crash. How is this gonna last when we always collapse? Slap, 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 slap. When we always collapse. Oh, I can see the end begin. When we always collapse. Oh, I can see the end begin. There's too much sky, too blue, too white. The birds on the wire are singing, but I don't know why. Why aren't the roses hanging their heads? They're standing straight up, blooming instead. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Why does that guy have a smile on his face? Why is the sun even shining today? Why are the headlines talking about love? Don't they all know what happened to us? Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. Now that we're apart, there's nothing. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Ooh, blood in my heart. Ooh, blood in my heart. Saw you for the first time in a while, in a while. You seemed so surprised I worked out a smile, out a smile, out a smile. 'Cause I've grown and I've changed, yeah, we went separate ways. How come we're both back here? 'Cause you pushed me away, had my life rearranged, but still we're both back here. Close to me, I want you Your troubled heart bleeds like a river. It's rushing towards fields painted greener. It doesn't see the demons behind, praying you're getting close to the line, so they can get their hands on love and trade it off for silver. The curtain's nice, but what it hides is worse than sticks and stones. Before you climb the fence tonight, look through the microscope. Better the devil you know. 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 Your nervous spine is crawling with shivers. You're standing right in the eye of a blizzard. You're inches from a shelter, so near to warmth of a home and a chandelier, shining down its light on love, wishing you'd be closer. The curtain's nice, but what it hides is worse than sticks and stones. Before you climb the fence tonight, look through the microscope. Better the devil you know. 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 Before you climb the fence tonight, look through the microscope. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know.
Waiting here on this cold, lonely
love go wrong, my sugar?
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we have Mr. Myke Merrill, and he has been, oh my gosh, I just feel like he is so gifted. He knows what he's talking about. All these things I've gone throughout my life, since the age of 5. Everything he's saying is making sense. And he's talking about 4 words that you should never use or not ever use.
And you just used one of them. And you just used one of them.
No, should. Should. That's the word I used.
You said you should not.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not use need, should, ought, or must as main verbs. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, because that uses the word in trying to encourage people not to use them.
Yeah, you just said should not use.
That's why I do not say it that way. You can frame your thought in much better ways than using need, should, ought, or must as your main verb. Politicians, preachers, teachers, parents have as the main verb of many sentences need, should, ought, or must. What we need to do, what we really should do, or you should do, what we ought to be doing, what we have to do, we're supposed to do. Those are words that create a sense of obligation. But the reality is, if you're not doing that, or you don't, what's the outcome? There really is no great consequence. Just life is normal. So saying what you need, should, ought, or must do, when a parent says that, or a pastor, or a politician, or a teacher, or a pundit of any kind, it just rolls off because it's a meaningless encouragement or a demand. There's much better ways of making an imperative than saying need, should, ought, or must. In fact, when a military commander comes into a situation, it would be rare, in my thinking, for a military commander to say, you need to, you should, you ought, you must. What they say is, you will. You will do this.
You better.
And that becomes, yes, you will do it. And now it is something that has the force of their authority, but it also establishes what the future is going to be. And that becomes a much more powerful way of speaking rather than need, should, ought, or must. It's amazing to me, even my own language. Gosh. I listen to my own conversation, and I will hear myself use the verb need, should, ought, or must. And I'll backtrack and say, I just said you should do this. Let me back up. It will help you greatly when you do this instead of you should.
Yeah, because ought, should, or you might need to, these are kind of like suggestions. Maybe you might need to, or you oughta, or maybe you should. But must, to me, seems like different out of all these words in this list. Like must means like you must do this, which goes into the authoritarian realm of saying such things, like you were saying a drill instructor.
Right. We were talking about your children brushing their teeth, and you say you must brush your teeth. But what if they don't? Well, over a very long period of time, their teeth will rot and fall out of their head. But to say you have to do this, you really should be doing this, you need to do this, it eventually is overwhelming to the listener's mind, and they simply disregard it.
So
and it's over.
Yeah, it's overused.
You will. Think this through for yourself.
Should do
if you
this.
do
Can,
this,
will.
if you do this. So, yes, you can, you will. It is possible. there is great value in, and you can phrase importance in ways other than the overused words of need, should, ought, and must. The challenge is parents frequently will use one of those verbs, and they get into screaming matches with their spouse, their neighbors, their children, their children's teachers, themselves, and not have a result that has any benefit or positive outcome other than the conflict. And in my view, need, should, ought, and must are what I call obligation verbs.
Okay.
They create a sense of obligation. This is
or
something
suggestion.
You are obliged. Well, suggestion is, may I suggest you brush your teeth?
Okay.
And most parents don't say.
No, I've never said that. I'd like to.
No.
Yes, I get it.
So when you say that need, should, ought, or must are a suggestion, you actually don't mean that, because this is not. I'm not just advising you. I am commanding you. This is an order. And you are going to comply. And the problem is,
or else,
it often doesn't result in obedience. Maybe in some situations it will. But you can also simply say a directive: brush your teeth right now before you do anything else, as opposed to you need to brush your teeth, you really ought to brush your teeth, you should brush your teeth, you have to brush your teeth, you must brush your teeth. It's just brush your teeth right now. That's the way it is.
That is so funny. I never really thought of it. Like, I used to say, you should go brush your teeth right now, or stuff like that. But now I'm like, go brush your teeth. Go brush your teeth right now.
And now it just kind of rolled. So if you read newspaper articles or watch the news and listen to what politicians say, the need, should, ought, and must verbs come pouring out of their mouth over and over and over. And the challenge is, when people hear it, they say, okay, I know I'm under pressure. I know that this is a requirement. I know I'm not doing the right thing, but I don't care anymore. And it actually has a reverse impact that the speaker may be surprised about and may be distressed about. What I'm telling people they need to do, they won't do. We need to heal racial tensions in our country. We should be doing that. We really must repair the racial separation that's going on in our country. Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, I know we should. I know we need to do that. But we haven't been able to do it in the last 400 years, and why is it up to me to start doing that now? And so what happens is you have this imposed sense of obligation that the listeners will respond with okay, but what do I do about it? Well, we need to do it. We really should be doing it. And people can be incredibly intense and pound the podium and scream and rant and rave and get on every camera in the world, and nothing changes.
Well, yeah, when you do that, I'm putting up my walls. You're yelling, you're screaming, you're pounding. I'm putting up walls.
But you're
and I'm hard-headed. I'm going to go the opposite direction.
Yes, you're putting up a resistance to the demand that is being pressed upon your life by need, should, ought, and must. So what happens is, when it's overused, the listener or even the culture will say, yeah, but I don't care. And that's one of the reasons why we're stuck in the fix that we're in, because no one actually knows what are the steps to doing change of racial tension in our country, because those are culturally based issues. They're deeply, deeply rooted in American culture, and where people cannot even see it in their own lives. And so to say, stop being you and be someone else, the answer is that's not going to happen. So we'll end up with this amazing amount of tension that no one can describe what it is that will bring about the repair that need, should, ought, or must happen. And so we're just stuck. We just get stuck. And families get that way. When you say to your child, you need to study your French homework, you really should be doing it. You need to do that. And they say, okay, yeah, you're right. But they don't apply themselves to it because there's no action reward, or there's no negative consequence. There's not either a positive outcome or a negative outcome that is associated with the need, should, ought, or must. And so since there's no actual connection to motivation, that's in the book that I wrote, we deal with 4 complexes and how they interact with each other. And the pressure to need, should, ought, or must is applied to motivation, but those are not motivational words. They don't actually work in creating motivation. And so that's part of what my colleague Myke Wilson and I from the West Coast, he's not able to be on this broadcast. We often do broadcast shows like this together.
I know, it made me so sad. I was even prepared to do a pre-record so he could be here with you.
Program, right, with a whole bunch of guys in his house, and so he's not able ever to do a Sunday event. And if we can record on a different day than Sunday evening, we can actually make that happen. But
yeah,
that's beside the point. The reality is, when we go out and train, we train in business situations. We train colleges. We were before COVID hit, that October before then, we were at a small college in Kansas, and we trained the entire student body and the faculty on these principles of meaningful dialogue that is based on the 4 complexes that we teach in the book, Why Do People Act That Way, and What Can I Do About It? It's available on Amazon. The 4 complexes are perceptions. I believe there are 10 senses of perception. The emotions are 5 basic emotional systems. We talked about that. The motivations that are inside of us, I believe there are 5 basic drivers. And our behaviors, there are 2 basic pathways that our behavior can take. And that changes our perceptions, and that changes our motivations, and that interacts with our emotions. And so it becomes a truly interactive sense of reality: perceptions, emotions, motivations, and behaviors. And once and there's only 4, that's it. There's nothing else to learn: perceptions, emotions, motivations, and behaviors. We call it PEMB. And the PEMB sense of reality, we call it reality intelligence, gives a person handles by which they can take any event that's going on in their lives and say, what are my perceptions about this event? What are my emotions? What are my motivations? What are my drivers? And what are my behaviors as a result? Now, even when you're impacted, you're just totally stymied, you have no idea what to do next, we can now put up on the table some very meaningful language to talk about the 10 perceptions, the 5 emotions, the 5 motivational drivers, or the 2 lines of behaving. And now we can figure out, where's the block? What is it that's stopping you from acting, or acting in ways that you're not finding productive or helpful? And we can find what those are. It's like a household with mice in it, and all of a sudden you can lift all the furniture up and you can see where they are. And the issue is, I don't want them to ruin my furniture, and I hate seeing the droppings all over the place. If I could just at once pick all the furniture up at the same time, I could see what's really going on. That's what we do. We teach that concept, how to understand reality and get a grip on it.
Sometimes it's really hard to get a grip. You know, your hands could be oily or sweaty. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's very important to realize these things. And I'm so glad you went through the PMB, because those are one of the really great notes that Michelle sent to me. But perceptions, emotions, motivations, and behaviors. And it's so interesting to think of these things and write things down and try to dig deep and figure out what exactly is going on and what is causing this. And when you were talking about this, you're saying making people stop this. And I think the big thing in this whole thing, especially in today's day, is fear. Even before now, fear is something that really stops people. What happens if I do this or if I do that?
There are human beings that are stopped by fear, and there are human beings who are excited by fear. The thrill seeker, people ride roller coasters. Tomorrow, I write a blog for my local community, and I do what is the national day. I was just writing this before we came back on the air, and tomorrow is National Roller Coaster Day. And I hate roller coasters. I hate the feeling of my body pummeling through space and jamming from left side to right side, up, down, going upside down. My body does not like that feeling. But there are people that love going into the dark, upside down, spinning corkscrew. It creates fear that is thrilling to them. So not everyone is stopped by fear. I cannot understand why somebody would put two skinny little boards on their feet, lock them down, and go down a mountain I would not climb down for my life and call it fun because they love to ski. You're in Colorado, and people actually make huge money doing that kind of insanity, which to me is terrifying.
Insane.
That is panicking.
Yeah, not me, Coach. I might do cross country, maybe. And sometimes there's those little hills, and I'm like, okay, I'm on two different skis. My legs could go this way or that. This is not cool to me. This is out of my control.
The point is, there are people who love the fear that incites in them. So some people are stopped by fear, and some people are incited by fear. Some people are stopped by anger. They are so enraged, they're frozen as a result of angry situations. Other people are thrilled by that. The military is full of people who are delighted when there's a battle going on. I say, what is wrong with you that you want to get into the battle? There's something in some people that the whole issue of empowerment, of rage, of force, competition, drive is very significant to them. And there are others for whom that is absolutely a frozen moment. There are people for whom love is a strong motivator, and there are others that are stopped. They don't know what to do with it. They're scared when somebody loves them too much. So one of the principles that we teach, Myke and I teach, is that every emotion is neutral in and of itself. There are no bad emotions. There are no good emotions. They are simply neutral. There are two vital questions that every person can ask. Question number one, what is this doing to me? And question number two, what do I do with it? So when a situation brings up some powerful emotion, let's say a fear, the fear itself is not bad. If you're walking in the Rocky Mountains and you see two very cute brown bear cubs on one side of your path, and you go up to take their picture and you hear growling behind you.
Yeah, that's
Mama. And all
Mama.
of a sudden you realize the mother bear is on the other side of me from her cubs. If you don't have an adequate amount of fear to run and save your life, you're going to die. So fear is not a problem. Fear is actually a blessing.
Well, fear, don't run, because it's just like with dogs. If you run with a bear, that kicks in that hunter instinct, and they will automatically chase you. So walk at a slow yet poignant and brisk pace. do not run. Try not to run. I'm like, I cannot help it. If there's a mama bear going to eat me, I'm going to run.
The fear is not bad. The fear is appropriate. So the question then is, when I'm afraid of public speaking, or I'm afraid of finishing this project, or I'm afraid of getting into a screaming match with my spouse, the fear is not the problem. The question you ask is, what is this fear doing to me? It's stopping me. It's preventing me from advancing. It is, I can't finish the work, or whatever. What's it doing to me? And then, what am I doing with the fear? So the fear could actually be helping me. Yes. When I was in college, I was that obnoxious, truly obnoxious person that started my papers the day they were assigned, and I was done writing them 2 or 3 days later. We'd have 10 days, 2 weeks to write a 5-page paper. I would be done the first day. And my classmates just despised me because they wanted to put it off. And they would say, I don't have any good ideas. I trained my mind to be able to develop creative ideas early on in the process. But there are people for whom the fear releases adrenaline and endorphins in their brain. They actually think better when they're scared to death.
Yes. I think that's where it comes down for me. Like in school, my name was Tessa Nicole Procrastinator Thomas. Procrastinator was really big. I'd wait till last minute, and then I'd be afraid, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a bad grade, and if I get a bad grade, I'm going to get grounded or in trouble, and I'd whip it out like nothing else, and I'm like...
You'd have this incredible thought.
Yes.
And it worked. And you would say, why couldn't I have thought of this 9 days?
That's what I was about to say. Why couldn't I have done this from the get-go? But no, it was that fear that inspired me.
Yes. And so, that when you ask the question, what is the fear doing to me? Well, it's stimulating my adrenal glands. That makes my brain fire faster. I come up with creative ideas. So the question then is, could you have done that if you trained yourself a different way? Well, that's an entirely different question, because you may say, it's like a roller coaster. I love waiting for the last second and zoom down that roller coaster, and you go crazy all the way over. But then the next class, it'll go up, 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 and then we do the same thing over again. And some people, they just love that sense of fear. I'm going to get caught. This is dangerous. This is insane. Why am I doing this? And so you asked the question before, why did the young people turn on the hose and flood the whole thing? There's that sense of, this is dangerous, and I love the danger. I love the feeling of fear that comes with doing something right at the edge that I'm going to get caught for, and maybe I will get caught. And even if nobody caught us, sometimes the perpetrators will actually leave enough clues that they get caught, because the fear is a reward in and of itself. So when you look at family situations or organizations that are caught in fear cycles, some families are caught in fear cycles, some organizations, churches or businesses, colleges, educational situations, they can get caught in a fear syndrome. And the problem is, one person will say fear is always bad, and everyone else is supposed to agree with that. I don't agree with that. And then people will say, fear's not always bad.
That is true.
It's to be scared till you're pooping in your pants, and that feeling, what's wrong with you? Well, that's a person for whom fear is debilitating, but there are people for whom fear is thrilling. And so what we're saying is, the two critical questions on everything: what is this doing to me, and what do I do with it? And if we can honestly answer those questions when we're impacted or we're finding broken relationships, we can heal them. We can actually restore broken relationships when we start asking questions differently about any given situation.
So true. You're so right. I don't know. I'm just like blown away. And still thinking about that roller coaster. You're like, the words you were saying totally lined up with the click, 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 click. And it gets slower and slower until there's nothing else in this, like, brrr, and there you go on your little ride. And
as you're doing that on this radio program, my anxiety level increases.
Gosh, yes.
The click, click.
Yes, me too.
I hate it as a kid. I hate it as an adult. When I go with my grandchildren to amusement parks, unless they torment me into riding with them, which I'll do once or twice, I watch. I do not like and it comes from my proprioceptive sense, which is my skeleton telling me where I am in space.
Yes.
Is really oversensitive. And so, to me, the plummeting of my body through space is overwhelming to my brain. Some people are extremely visual. Well, that's easy because you can just shut your eyes.
Yes.
You don't have to look at things flying by you. If you're a really visual person,
you're still going to see it. You're still going to see it if you're overly visual. If you close your eyes, like for me, if I close my eyes, I can still see things in my mind's eye. You know what I mean?
Right. Your mind is doing it, but what you're doing is using your experience, your memory.
Mm-hmm.
The things are not physically flying by your eye. And if you're highly visual,
mm-hmm.
it is the amount of information going into your brain from your eyes that becomes overwhelming. So
right.
You can close your eyes and see it. When I close my eyes, I don't see it. But I can't stop my skeleton from sensing where I am in space because my proprioceptive is so intense for me personally. So
yes.
Out of my 10 senses of perception, proprioceptive is extremely sensitive. So when I'm on a roller coaster or one of those spin around kinds of teacup things or something that turns me upside down, that puts so much information into my brain, it's overwhelming to my system, which is why I hate riding roller coasters. They're never going to fall off the track. I'm not going to die. It has nothing to do with that. It's that my body can't take that much information because I'm so sensitive there. Now, there are other people who are tactile.
That totally makes sense.
Tactile sense is extremely sensitive. So if you go into a fun house and there's air puffing, just a little that's overwhelming to their system because their skin is so sensitive.
Oh my goodness.
They utterly hate that. Or
yes.
You give them a cashmere sweater and every thread of the cashmere
is touching their nerves.
Something in their skin.
Yeah.
And they can't stand that feeling, so they wear super tight garments that squeeze their skin evenly because their tactile sense is so extreme. So each person's perceptions can be very hypersensitive or very hyposensitive or just in the normal range. And what happens then is when somebody is experiencing distress, this is one of my theories about PTSD, is that a soldier or a person in a traumatic situation, it is their hypersensitive sense perception that has been triggered by the trauma. And so one person sees a colleague get shot and killed, and it's not traumatic to them. It's awful, but they don't have PTSD.
But they're used to it. Yeah, they're used to it.
No. It's because their visual sense is at the 20 to 80% of effectiveness. But the person whose visual sense is at 97, they see somebody get shot, they cannot get that picture out of their mind.
I thought that was everybody. basically,
No,
except for a small percentage.
No. There
Wow.
are people for their visual. Let's say normal is 20 to 80. I'm just
Okay.
making. I mean, I use these numbers, 20
Yeah.
to 80. An event that occurs within 20 to 80 is absorbed. So you see something happen, but you're not a super highly visual person. Let's say you're a super auditory person. When you relax, it's not looking at a sunset, it's listening to music because you're so auditorily sensitive. You can hear the slightest sound at a very great distance. So somebody gets shot and you can actually hear blood droplets hitting the ground. Hear that, not imagine it.
You're
You can hear
hypersensitive.
it. They are hypersensitive. That person will have PTSD on that event through their auditory. So they will lay awake at night hearing those sounds. Every time they hear rain dropping off the roof and
They hear
splattering,
blood.
they're
my gosh.
traumatized by the sound. But other people who are in the 20 to 80 range of auditory, they can hear they didn't hear the blood splatter, so raindrops don't mean anything to them, or bacon
peaceful.
sizzling in a pan. It just doesn't traumatize them again. So when somebody says, I'm struggling with PTSD, I will say, let me talk to you about your 10 senses of perception.
Yeah, and that's
tell
interesting.
me which one is most intense for you, which ones are the least. And now, once I know that, now tell me about the trauma that you are post-traumatic.
Yes.
And I have found the link between the trauma and a person's extremely intense sense of perception. So if it's proprioceptive, let's say it's proprioceptive is your skeleton telling you where you are in space. That's what the proprioceptive, like your eyes tell you what light is doing, and your hearing tells you what sound is doing. Your skeleton tells you where you are in physical space. And so it's a sense perception. So
yeah, I think I
bomb
experienced
goes off.
that. Yeah, continue. And I'll say my story afterwards, but yeah, continue, please. A bomb goes off.
And your body, from the compression in the air, moves backwards 1/2 inch and forward again. Not from volition. Your body just moves backwards and forwards. And you are a person at 97 in proprioceptive. You're a dancer. You're a figure skater. You love skateboarding and flipping your body around, and you know exactly where your body is all the time in space. That's overwhelming to me. But there are people for whom their physical location in space, they are extremely sensitive. So a bomb goes off, their body moves back and forwards 1/2 inch. They have a post-traumatic stress disorder because they feel their body moving and they can't stop it. But another soldier right next to them that felt the same bomb go off has their proprioceptive at 75. They're just normal. They're a normal person. So their body moved back, and their brain doesn't remember it. They don't perceive that as traumatic. So the one soldier who is extremely sensitive in the area of proprioceptive has PTSD from that event, and the next soldier 5 feet away doesn't. And I think, now this is a working theory, but we're finding some anecdotal evidence. We really need to test it all the way out, but we're finding anecdotal evidence that there's a link between the super sensitive perceptions and the trauma that they experience. There are people that can watch, like I watched my mother die. That was not traumatic for me. But there are other people that see that happen and they can't get that out of their mind. I'm not trying to raise terrible things all through it. There are people and their bodies are hypersensitive to touch. They are destroyed by that. And there are others who aren't. And you look and say, how could you not be destroyed by that? How can that not destroy you? Because in their senses of perception, that's just something they can deal with, but others can't. So which one's right, which one's wrong? That is an irrelevant question. What does it do to you? And what
Personally,
do you do with it? If we can get to that, we can help people solve those incredibly life-transforming issues.
yes, and we're all very different individuals, and so things affect us differently, and we have to take different doses of different medicines, whether it's music or religion or whatever else is going on out there, meditation. There's so many things that we can partake of that can help us. But, okay,
if somebody's PTSD is in the area of visual, then my recommendation for solving it is going to be entirely visual.
Yes.
If somebody's PTSD is linked to their auditory, I'm not going to recommend any visuals at all. I'm going to recommend auditory. And what we can do then, if somebody's is gustatory, let's just say it's in their taste, and a bomb goes off, and their body moves half an inch voluntarily, but the taste of gunpowder is in their mouth. That's the traumatic part. And so now we can start addressing the issue of the trauma in their specialty. It's not relevant. A bomb went off and that's traumatic for everyone. It's not. It's traumatic for those. It becomes PTSD stimulating when it's within that soldier's or those citizens' experiences, and their perceptions are highly sensitized in that area.
And it's funny how these different areas can affect other areas. Like you're saying, okay, so women or people that are abused by spouses or family or whatnot, they have a certain PTSD. Also, with being molested, there's another sort of PTSD. Paranormal experiences, there's another sort of PTSD.
Universal.
And these things... No, and it's interesting how these different things can feed each other. Like with me, I had abusive PTSD as well as paranormal. Paranormal is my biggest one. And then when I went into the military, I was completely fine with firing so many different guns. The biggest thing that got to me was a grenade. I was super afraid of, I'm going to take this grenade, pull the pin, and throw it. And when I throw it, I'm going to drop it and blow everybody up. That was my biggest fear. But I was actually able to throw it. It wasn't too far, but we were still protected, and it was over with. But PTSD affects us in different ways, and there's so many different things that can trigger it, whether it's from being in the military, being molested or raped, or being abused, or having paranormal experiences. It all hones in on your psyche and who you are at that apparent moment and what exactly triggers it. It could be smells, it could be sounds, it could be so many different things.
So I use that word, psyche. When we go out to teach, obviously I'm a minister, I'm a pastor, and so everybody's about spiritual stuff. And I've had people say to me, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in that spiritual stuff. I don't even think it exists. And I say, I respect that. I have no problem with that at all. And usually atheist people will say to me, well, I've had religious people like you just jump down my throat about that. I've never had anybody agree with me. I say, I agree with you 100% because there are 10 senses of perception. The 10th one is the psyche, and it's about the spiritual realm. There are people whose eyes do not pick up any light or movement at all. They're blind. And if we say, let me tell you my testimony of the color red, the blind person will say, there's no such thing as red. What does it taste like?
Yeah. A dog would say that too.
Sound like?
I pee on that fire hydrant. It's not red, but it's interesting to me.
Right. So a person who's blind will say, nothing you say is going to convince me that red exists. I know people who have no psyche for the spiritual realm. They don't sense it at all. And so the condition for eyes that don't work, we call blindness. The condition of not being able to hear any sound at all, we call deafness.
Yes.
To not be able to pick up anything spiritual, we call it atheism.
Wow.
And what I'm saying is, either accept or reject my testimony that I do understand the spiritual realm, but even if you don't, I'm okay with that. And I've had people just open mouth. I've never heard anyone explain it that way. So of the 10% senses of perception, the psyche picks up the spiritual realm. And so psychic phenomena, what happened to my mother? Did her soul leave her body? Did I make that up? Was that part of my imagination? Where did that come from? I have no idea.
I think she was free from her physical body and she left, and you felt her energy go past and leave. And you felt somebody leave.
Right.
You didn't know who it was.
People that would say, you can't feel that energy leave. There's
because they don't understand it. They don't understand it.
Because they're blind
yes.
in that area or deaf. Leprosy is the inability to have the skin feel pain.
Oh, no, yes, because it died.
That's what leprosy is. So, if you get a scratch on your nose or your fingertip, why put a Band-Aid on it or medicine? Because you don't feel anything.
You don't feel it
and then
anyways.
It gets gangrenous, but you still don't feel anything. So you look at the wound, and your skin is rotting off of your skeleton, but it doesn't hurt. That's what leprosy is. Leprosy is blindness in tactile skin.
Yes, and it all has to do with perception. Like my mom, she adopted me. She's sitting on an end of a dock. She's kicking her feet back and forth, and all of a sudden something came up, and you know how fish like suck on your toes or your legs or whatever when you're underwater. Well, something grabbed onto her toe, and when she pulled it back, there was a big old cut in her toe. She didn't feel it. She didn't realize it even happened until she saw the blood flowing. Because she did not perceive it underwater until she brought it up from out of water, and then she saw it, and then that's when she felt it. It's all due to perception.
And there are other people. I'm the kind of person where a mosquito lands on my arm, I can feel the mosquito land on my arm because my skin is that sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is the 10 senses of perception. We have a normal realm, 20 to 80. Below 20 is hyposensitive, and above 80 is hypersensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, a stimulus occurs. What does it do to me, and what do I do with it? Now I have somewhere to go in a conversation about things that are meaningless or overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I can begin talking about that. Then my emotions kick in. Am I excited about that? Am I fearful from that? Am I angry about that? Am I depressed by that? Now I have an emotion. Now I get ready to act, and I have motivations. And so I trigger my thoughts or my values or my habits. And I have different ways in which I'm motivated to act. And then it goes to my behavior. Do I act out, or do I stop my action? That is, do I engage or do I disengage? So I see one of my children scratch another child meanly, not because there was a bug on them about to bite them, but because they're just being mean. So I see that. And then I'm angry about that. What do I do with the anger? I go over and grab my child and say, how would you like it if somebody did that to you? Now I'm motivated and I behave in a certain way. So the question is, do I act out the action against my child, or do I disengage? And at any point, it changes the dynamic of what's happening all across the board. What we teach is those 4 concepts and the various elements within them, and people can then say, so when somebody says to me, stop and think before you act, is that what you actually think about? And my response is, yes, this is what I think about. When somebody says, stop and think, this is what I go through. What am I perceiving? What am I feeling? What am I motivated to do? How am I going to act right now? And I've been doing this for a long time, so I can do that relatively quickly. But there are situations that I'm involved in. I work with an orphanage in Africa. I own a school in Honduras. I've traveled all over the world. There are some situations people will call me or email me, and these are incredibly difficult.
They're like, what do we do?
Say, yes, what do we do? And I'll say, I would like 15 minutes. I will call you back, or I'll sit down and write an answer. But I need time to think through all the aspects of this. Is that okay with you? Do I have your permission? Give me 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never had anybody refuse, and they'll say, sure. So then I'll walk away from my computer. I'll walk 7 minutes away from my office, 7 minutes back, and I work through what are my perceptions, what are my emotions.
That's awesome.
What are my motivations? What are my options in behavior? When I sit back down to answer the situation, I actually have something to contribute. So I've been doing counseling for a long time, and families have come in, usually family situations, and I have said, the way you're presenting this circumstance, I would like to set an appointment for 2 days from now that will give me time to think all the way through what will help you the most. Is that okay with you? And don't take any action. Don't get divorced. Don't walk out. Don't beat each other up. Just give me 2 days. This has been going on for quite some time. Can you give me those 2 days? And we'll meet again on Tuesday so that we can take up this conversation from that point. And I've had people say to me, you mean you don't know the answer already? Or you're not just leading us along? No.
Hey, let me walk and work through this. Hey, is 15 minutes too long? Because this is pretty good. You're going out into the world and collecting energy and messages and bringing it back. That's awesome.
And will you let me do that? And
yes.
Then and it's really disengaging to people when somebody says, I would like permission to think about your situation for a little while, rather than just give you a hasty answer.
Yes.
And people say, yeah, sure, that's fine. And interestingly, those 2 days, that's just not a cheap technique. It is a way of allowing people to grant permission, and they themselves need that permission to be able to process.
That's
so
amazing.
That when I say stop and think, that's what I teach people to do. How to stop and think.
And you don't just preach it and teach it, you do it. You put it into practice. Yes, that's amazing.
Right, and I've done that all of my life. So instead of I'm not like the big answer man. It's really a process. If I have anything to contribute, it's the process. And each person will take up the pieces of the process, and they will use them in unique, special, personal ways. And I'm fine with that. They'll change it. They change the language. That doesn't matter to me.
Everybody's different.
The issue is they come up with it's like cogs in a machine, but they can put their machine together any way they want.
Exactly.
And what I do is I provide the mechanics, and then people can actually utilize that any way they want.
That's amazing.
And it seems to work.
I really, really hate to cut you off, and we've gone much later than we really have before, but we do have to go to our second music break. I just this stuff is so important. I don't want to cut you off because I want to keep going, but we have to have our break. We got to get our pee-pee break and our food, drinks, walking about the cabin. But here we have Miss Myke Hay from Ontario, Canada. I think I said she was 21 before. I believe she's 19 or 20 at this point. She just graduated last year, so I believe she's 19. She is so amazingly talented. She even has music videos. So if you want to look her up on YouTube, look for Myke Hay, Mykaley YNHAY, and she's going to be singing Gravity, Mirror, Pins and Needles, and then we have Mr. Fred Johnson III, which I say the Toyd, with After Dark, and he's from Canyon County, California. These are all independent artists. If you guys can go out and find them, give them likes and thanks and whatnot, I'd be so grateful. But you guys don't go back anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Signs leave behind for you to
Taught me how to turn a
shoulder cold. No, no one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. Try to erase the ink that's left upon my chest. I'll attest, I don't really wanna forget to forget you. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep your shoulder cold. No, no one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No, no one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. Talking on pins and needles, every word through a microscope. You keep stomping down on the ground while I've been stuck on this tightrope. I just wanna say what I wanna say without your sentence. I'm not willing to do the time when I'm innocent, and I'm innocent. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. Walked on my share of thin ice with your blowtorch at my feet. You won't ever see me beg, so take this tongue off your leash. I'm gonna say what I wanna say, don't need permission. Interpret it how you want, it's my decision. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. Dancing on shattered glass, kicking the pieces all around. My safety has been broken, this is now a hunting ground. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. because she had the range. I knew she was the one that never could go home again. Plastic life like limo seats. I don't know why I can't control this urge to hurt again. Yeah, living at the door. I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Change the things that murder forever after. No matter what I say, after dark. Feeling ran to repugnant and fear. Behind a place with days of December. Concerning works were pushed in revenge. It doesn't matter what I say. It really doesn't. No matter what I say. After dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Secret homicides arranged in a series of pursuits. No matter what I say. Change in the stuff. Murder forever after. It doesn't matter what I say. Rude and fatal. Lacking the hint of conscience. No matter what I say. After dark.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So tonight we have Mr. Dr. Myke Merrill, and for some apparent reason, I have lost him. Looking back in my emails, I have even lost Michelle. I don't know where everybody has gone, so bear with me, grr, as I try to get Myke back on. Holy shnikes, this is insane. And what the heck is this? Now something popped up here that does not make sense to me. What the crack? I think I'm being hacked. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Okay, come on. Myke Merrill. But yeah, it's been an awesome show this evening. Myke has been amazing. He's got so many different answers. A lot I already knew, but a lot I did not know. So, what the crack? Okay. This is super weird. I just saw him for a second and then he's gone. Paging Dr. Myke Merrill. There he is. I see him. Let us try to call him once more. But thank you guys for hanging out. We've been going into some crevices, canyons, so on and so forth, as far as the psyche, the emotional, spiritual. Hello! I lost you. That was so weird. Well, I'm so glad you're back.
Tired flying.
Yes. You know, that will really make your arms tired trying to fly from there to here. Indeed. All the updrafts and everything, and yeah, it's pretty insane. That was insane. Even when I was trying to find Michelle on my email, that was blocked too. So I don't know if I've been hacked,
Right.
if my web route got cut off. I know I have to pay
You just
it.
disappeared. I was listening to music and then just disappeared.
That is so weird. Yeah, we were right about to go back in, and I'm like, okay, where'd he go? Okay, we're back. Everyone, we're back.
We are.
That was scary. That was adrenaline I did not like.
See, the fear has two questions attached to it. What did it do to you, and what do you do with it? Mm-hmm. A great learning experience.
Yes. I used it as like a flotation device instead of a sinker.
Good. That's very good.
I'm like, we can do this. We're going to find him. And you kept popping up, then disappearing. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? It was so strange. I cannot explain it. I swear to God, I can't. Very unique, for sure. All right, so where should we go from here? Like, we stopped. I didn't want to stop, but we have to take a break for everyone. Okay, let me get back to where I was. I lost a lot of things trying to figure out what happened. Where'd he go? How can I get him back? It was so strange. Okay, let's see. Okay, so that wasn't it. It was... Okay, so a lot of people these days dealing with the lockdown, then we get back out, they're saying you don't have to wear masks anymore if you're vaccinated, and now they're like, wear masks anyways, and so people are being filled with frustration, rage, so on and so forth. So let's talk about rage and how do people deal with this?
You know, that whole realm of why do people become so angry over changing situations is fascinating to me. In my training material, empowerment is about change, and it works two ways. When a person becomes angry or competitive or enraged or frustrated, they want something to change. It might be specific and it might be general, but they want something to change. Their anger will be resolved when they accomplish that change. Mm-hmm. But the flip side of the equation is that when change happens, some people react by becoming very angry. So in some ways, anger creates change, but in others, change creates anger. They're
I think a lot of times, like, people don't know how to react, so then they just lash out. You know, they lash out in anger or frustration.
Strategy. Well, something happens, it's a change.
Yes.
And then, what does it do to me, and what do I do with it? And so the operational questions arise again. What is this situation doing to me? What do I do with it? And the lack of desire or planning for change to occur results in some level of empowerment for a lot of people. There is in this world a phenomenon we refer to as chaos. Chaos, I define chaos as having two essential qualities. It is unpredictable and it is uncontrollable.
That's what I was going to say.
If
lack of control.
An event, it is unpredictable and uncontrollable. So the way you solve chaos is develop an ability to predict some aspect of it, or develop an ability to control some aspect of it. But when it's unpredictable and uncontrollable, it's chaos. And so when life is chaotic, it has those two qualities. What's interesting is there are individuals who reject a scientific medical approach to this whole COVID thing. They reject that. And it is a hoax, or it's not as serious as they say, or I don't understand the science.
Hey, I was just in the hospital, and all the rooms were empty except for the one I was in. Well, maybe they're on a different floor or somewhere else away from you. I don't know.
or you just didn't pay attention to, or you filtered that information. It doesn't make any difference what really happened. You can investigate that, but people will. So what will happen is when a person rejects, let's say, a medical approach or a scientific approach, then all of a sudden some government authority says, now you must wear a mask again. That seems to have come out of nowhere. It's chaotic. I can't control it, and I also can't predict it. So the reality is,
I predicted it.
There are people in our culture around the world who are subjecting themselves to a level of chaos that is a result of their own set of perceptions of things that are going on in the world. And there are people who find that thrilling, and there are people who find that overwhelming. So the issue for me is not just the mere fact that somebody becomes very angry over masking or over vaccinations or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. The reality is it tells me a great deal about the person who is becoming so angry. And I can then begin to ask questions. Why is this happening to you? What is it that's actually driving your anger? And what do you do with that anger? Do you internalize it? You turn the anger into bitterness, into anxiety. You create some kind of an internal mental distress. Or do you lash out? You drive like a maniac. You refuse to follow government mandates or whatever happens to be. So you can either internalize or externalize the energy that's going on from that level of rage. I think what's fascinating is if a person has a beloved relative who is in ICU, and the family members are asked, before you go in, keep your voice down, and we'd like you to put on a gown and a mask. I have never seen a family member not do that. They do it.
I actually
so
had
it's
a friend
not the mask
that didn't do it, but it was at the precipice of where that individual was about to leave his vessel. So generally she would mask up and wear all of these clothings that she should to protect him because he is so sick. But she just knew she had to go in there right then. And it was like 5 minutes later he was gone. But yeah, that's the only time that she didn't do it.
And what's happening then is, based on the circumstance, she knows that masking or not masking is irrelevant to the outcome. So it is very logical and sensible to say it no longer matters whether I mask or do not mask. What I'm saying is, in a situation where a person is asked, put on a mask for the benefit of this person who you love that's very, very ill. I've not seen people say, no, I can't wear a mask. I won't do it.
Right.
You're not going to tell me what to do. But in the COVID situation, the reaction is that severe at times, and the issue to me is not the mask or even the mandate. It's something else is going on relative to why does this situation result in that level of anger. So to me, that comes into the area of motivation. And in the area of motivation, Myke and I, my buddy from Washington State, and I, we teach that there are 5 drivers, and the 5 drivers are different from each other in what we call fluidity. Fluidity is how subject to flexibility that driver is. So the number 1 driver is a thought or a conversation. Very fluid, subject to rapid, quick change. It's very unstructured. Let's talk about what do we want to have on our pizza, and everybody says, "Oh, mushrooms," or
I hate mushrooms. Just kidding.
Pepperoni, whatever. And then somebody will say, "I've got an opinion on that." An opinion or a viewpoint is more rigid less flexible than a thought is. So then a person says, if you put pineapple and ham on it, I'm done. I'm not eating it. Or mushrooms, I'm allergic to mushrooms. That's my view. That's the way it is. And I'll just get something else. Or I'm going to get angry if you put mushrooms on. So a viewpoint, an opinion is less fluid, more foundational. The third level is what we call values. And it is the things that I think are important or have meaning for me. That's the third level motivation. I act out of my values. The fourth one, more rigid, less fluid, we call habits. And habits are, this is what I consistently do, and I have done it so many times, this is now my pattern. And then the fifth one, the most fixed, is identity or culture. It's when a person says, I am a something. So there. I live in New York, not New York City. I live away from New York City. But there are people who will say, they will say, I am a New Yorker. And when they say that, what they mean is, it is my culture. Mm-hmm. I was there for 9/11. I saw the buildings come down. I'm a fighter. I am a person who doesn't take any pushback at all. But somebody else may say, well, I'm a Missourian. I'm somebody who's from the Show Me State. And now that's my culture. Somebody else says, well, I'm a rebel from Georgia or South Carolina. Somebody else says,
I'm from Arkansas.
I'm from the Pacific Northwest. And so what will happen is, when a person begins describing their identity or their culture, that is absolutely rigid and virtually immovable.
Yes.
So when we get into a discussion about COVID treatments or COVID protocols, there are people in our country who have taken that as impinging on their identity. It is at the level of their culture. And so when you say, just put a mask on whenever you go into a store and walk out, take it off, the response is, I absolutely cannot do that. I will not do that because I'm not a sheep. I am not. And they put in I am statements. So when I hear that or read that online, what's interesting is the person is describing their perception of culture. And that's what they're resistant about. Don't change my culture. Don't change my identity. And so the level of rage that arises from something as simple as putting a mask on or not putting a mask on, getting a vaccine or not getting a vaccine, has very little to do with the mask or the vaccine. And it has much more to do with how the person sees themselves in culture, and then this becomes an attack on their culture. So now, when a mask issue comes up, and somebody is instantly enraged about that, it doesn't tell me anything about the mask. It tells me about the person's sense of identity and what their culture is. And the question then is, to me, is this important enough to override that person's culture, or do we allow that person to just maintain their sense of identity? And I've had many people, I circulate all over the world, and there are folks who say, you're not going to tell me that I have to wear a mask. And I say, I won't. I agree with that. And I'm going to go into a store anyway, so but the store owners are under a different set of circumstances than I am, and there may be consequences. Just bear in mind, there could be well, those consequences are unfair. I agree. They are. And you're very angry about them being unfair. I get
Yeah,
that
and
also.
I used to say, that's not fair. And my dad would always say, well, life's not fair. Get used to it. But I
and
think
my response is,
no matter how good or bad it
when somebody
is,
says
everything
it's not-
happens for a reason.
But when people say to me, that's not fair, I will say, I agree with that. And I stop talking. And what's very interesting is when somebody agrees on a very controversial point, it seems to interrupt the antagonism that was all set to build. People typically are not validated, they're opposed. And so and they become angrier. They have more energy that goes into fighting than when somebody goes, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. Recognize that there are consequences to the decisions that you are making. And I'm fine with that. That's just the way reality is. You take actions, there are consequences. And you can be angry. If you like being angry, then by all means, go ahead and be very angry. And I've had people say in response to that, I don't like being angry. And I say, well, then why are you angry? And they'll say, well, what options? I mean, I'm
Well,
just
it's a
angry. I'm
process,
just
and it's
angry 'cause
okay
I
to
am.
cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have these other emotions. Let it out. Don't let it build up
But
and
the
then
anger,
overflow.
and I say anger is not the problem. The
No.
question is, what is your anger doing to you, and what do you do with it? And and I say those things calmly, and when I validate their feeling as authentic, and I go to those two questions, there's no more questions that I ask than those two. What does it do to you, and what do you do with it? That seems to be helpful when people are caught in a cycle that they cannot get themselves out of. They're afraid, they're overwhelmed, they're angry, and they don't know what to do with those feelings. For me, if I have the opportunity, I can validate those feelings. It is okay. I say this to my grandchildren when they fall down and scrape their knee and they're crying like crazy, and family members or other people standing by say, oh, you shouldn't be crying about that. There are people that are hurt a lot worse than that. And I think that's not helpful. I say, it's okay to cry. But let me ask you a question. Are you going to get a scar out of this cut? And my grandchildren will look at me like, what? And I'll say, because a scar gives you an opportunity to tell a story. And once you have scars, you can now tell stories about your life, and that's really helpful. So maybe when you fell off your bike and you skinned your knee this bad, you'll just get a scab and it'll fall off. But maybe you're going to be lucky enough to have a scar. And my grandchildren, it's like the light just goes on, the pain is gone, and they now, the cut is doing something different to them, and they're doing something different with it. So that to me is extremely helpful to human beings as we work through the process of life.
Indeed. And I don't know. I like to fly by the seat of my pants, but some people hang on more closely. I've had people talking in the chat room.
Do you know where that expression comes from? Flying by your seat of your pants? Do you know where that comes from?
I just feel like it's being willy-nilly and letting things be as they may, and I don't know. Where exactly did it come from?
It's from the barnstormers. Back in the early days of flight, people would have a strap that holds them in.
Yeah.
But sometimes they were flying upside down. They didn't have instruments to tell them where they were in space.
Oh my gosh.
And so when their butts were on the seat, or if they were not on the seat, they were flying by the seat of their pants, saying, I'm upside down right now, or I'm right side up.
Right.
And that's what it meant, to fly by the seat of your pants. You have no instruments to tell you what's going on, so you feel your butt on the seat, or you're not on the seat anymore. That tells you you're right side up.
You're just being held on by your seat. But yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Being held on by the strap.
Yeah. That's me.
So go with it. It means go with it.
Yes. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to swim upriver. I'm all good with it. Whatever maybe shall be.
Go.
But Diecast in Racing said, when we fear something, we humans actually emit a pulse. Other entities pick up on it. It's an aphrodisiac to them, like a drug. What are your thoughts on that?
It comes back to the original two questions that I asked. What is it doing to you and what do you do with it? When you have a perception about someone else's perceptions, emotions, motivations, or behaviors, that also engages you. When somebody is fearful, somebody else is afraid, there are people who identify with that fear and they become afraid also. They have an associated fear that goes along with what they're saying. There are other people who see fear in someone and they become angry. That's empowering to them because someone else is afraid. There are other people who are very sympathetic. They want to help the person heal from their fear. So it's very interesting to observe what happens in family structures or in organizational structures when people have either mild or intense emotions and others perceive those emotions. What does it do to them and what do they do with it? And so my specialty is really human dynamics in relationships. And particularly when relationships become distressing. Mm-hmm. When people say, I don't know how to fix what's going on in my family, my business, my neighborhood, my life. And so the tools that we use, they're really very simple. Perceptions, emotions, motivation, behaviors, few questions. And then people have the tools to utilize those skills in addressing situations in their lives that they find distressful. For me, things that are distressful to me might not be distressful to you at all. And things that are distressful to you might be a piece of cake for me, even when they're very intense. So the issue is not how do I feel about your situation. The question is, what is this doing to you and what do you do with it? And once we can get to that level and give people permission to ask those kinds of questions and deal with the answers, I find that most people work through the challenges that they're facing. They don't need me to be the advisor and tell them what to do, because then I get into need, should, ought, and must. We're back at the earlier hour of our conversation.
Right.
I'm not going to do need, should, ought, or must. I'm going to say, let me give you some tools.
Need, not a must? Is that
and I will help you.
Need, should, not a must.
Need, should, ought, or must.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It sounded like one word. I'm going to use that. Need, should, ought, or must. Stop it. Just stop it. But yeah, it's so difficult. And
the other one, I have another set. If you want to go,
okay.
We have a few minutes left to talk.
Yes,
There's
please.
another one, and that is what I call ever, never, always language.
Yes.
Ever, never, always is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
When a person uses every, all the time, never, any kind of statement like that as an extreme statement, they're eliminating any information that is counter to their viewpoint. So when you walk in and your daughter has left her books sitting on the table, dining room table, and you say, you always do that. You never put your stuff away. That's a lie. It's not true. When you say to your husband, you are always late. Every single time I call you, you don't pick up the phone. That's actually not true. So a person is creating an extreme situation so that they validate their feeling and their perception on what's going on. So whenever I hear ever, never, or always, or any version, everyone, when your daughter comes to you and say, everyone's getting tattoos. That's actually not true. Not everyone is getting a tattoo.
Yeah, I'm 42 and I still don't have one.
7.
Yeah.
So the ever, never, always language is to me a cue that the person is eliminating what doesn't contribute to their viewpoint right now to validate their feelings. And so when families are arguing and making accusations, it usually will devolve into ever, never, always language. You always do this. You never do this. Everybody's always this. Nobody's doing this. And so when I hear that language, say, slow down a little bit. Let's add in anecdotes that don't contribute to ever, never, and always. And let's see if that's really true. And so then it slows down the conversation and it breaks up this giant iceberg of ever, never, always that's certainly going to sink you. And being able to find a way of saying, let's say most of the time, or what frustrates
almost
me
always.
right now is right. Or the real issue is you left your books on the table and I'm trying to get dinner ready, and that is frustrating to me right now.
Yeah.
So it's not you always do this, you never do this. We tend to explode things out to that level.
Over-exaggerate.
Let's bring it back down to what's going on right now. What does that do to you? What are you doing with that? And we can take ever, never, always out of the mix. And I find that helpful.
Yes, and I correct people a lot. Never say never, because if you say never, it generally happens. So, don't do it.
Right.
And if you do, knock on wood. I'm not superstitious, but it kind of works. I don't know. Maybe it's not intuition, but intent and following through on things. But anywho's, yeah, it's pretty interesting, these words and the power that people allow them to have. So how do you feel about affirmations? Do you feel like affirmations are helpful for people?
An affirmation, you may be using the word differently than I'm understanding it, but an affirmation is a positive stroke without regard to what actually is happening in the moment. An affirmation says, I believe in you. I hear what you're saying. What you're feeling or saying is valid. Let's go with that. So to me, an affirmation is always helpful. I tend not to phrase things in negatives. I tend to phrase them in positives.
Yeah, and there's also the theory that when people write, if there's an upward slant, they're thinking positively. You know, there's so many different variables and so many different things in there that you can read into.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the handwriting analysis, that's a whole different science. And I've toyed with a little bit of that, but it's the same kind of effect. That when a person is discouraged, what is it doing to you? What do you do with it? I tend to turn things down. And so you'll find their faces turned down. Their look turns, they look downward. They write at a downward slant. It's just human to do that. And when they're optimistic, they tend to do things in the opposite direction with an upward slant.
Very interesting. So, I would like you to tell our listeners who have been listening to your awesomeness, like everything you've said tonight, I'm like, yes. Like, you're so on point. I think you're very knowledgeable. You've gone through life and you know this not through just learning it, but experiencing it. And you have this book called Why Do People Act That Way? And What Can I Do About It? So where can our listeners find your book and buy it or get in contact with you?
There are 3 versions of the book, same edition, but 3 versions. They're all on Amazon. Amazon is a print on demand. You can get a physical book with a great binding and a book cover. You can get an ebook, or you can get an Audible book, an audio. We did a recording of it. It's my voice reading, and so I actually know what I meant to say. And we did some field testing before we did it that way. It took hours and hours for me to get the recording right, but that was a lot of fun. So you can get a print on demand, an ebook for your Kindle reader, or an audiobook. It's available on Amazon. Myke and I have a podcast called Gripping Reality. And it's available on YouTube. Go to just type in Gripping Reality, Myke and Myke. I spell Myke with a Y, M-Y-K-E. He spells Myke with an I, M-I-K-E. And so you can contact us, either one of us, by Myke@grippingreality.com. We answer all the emails that come in. We do training, we do teaching, we have books, we have resources. The content, we have a huge amount of content, and love doing virtual training, one-on-ones, events, business situations. We do everything. And sometimes one of us will go, and then other times we train together, and those are really the best situations. So on Amazon, my website is drmyke.com. I spell Myke with a Y, so drmyke.com. That's really a good landing spot. You can start from there, and everything is available from there.
That's so awesome, and I was super excited. Okay, so I was doing overnight security all week, and I thought it was you that I had to reschedule, you and Myke, and she's like, wow, if we do that and we do a pre-record, we can have them both on, and so I was super stoked about that, and then I was like, oh no, it's not Myke, it's Mr. Peter Panagore. But yeah, I'm just super happy that you were here tonight, and I don't know, I would really love to, even if we have to do a pre-record with the both of you, for you guys to work together and bounce off of each other. And I mean, it's so...
If this has been fun for you, when Myke and I are both on at the same time, it is like being on a wild ride.
Hell yes.
And you don't know whether you're going to flip upside down or get wet. It is really fun. We love training together. We really do.
Yeah, and I could see that, and I've been pushing for that from the get-go, but she's like, no, the other Myke doesn't really do weekends, and then when we were talking about a pre-record, she's like, oh yeah, maybe I can get him in, and then I'm like, oh no, it's not Myke and Myke, but it's this other guy, and she's like, oh, and I was like that too. I was like, oh man, because I was really looking forward to the energy, because I could really feel it.
Well, we've done guest repeat appearances on quite a number of shows. The response from listeners has been positive, and so if that works out, we would just absolutely delight to do that. It's just that certain days of the week, Myke Wilson's not available, and I generally have a more flexible schedule.
Okay, well, I'm pretty open. School's starting here. I thought it was the 18th, but guess what? I get a little extra bonus. I get an extra week to get the kids ready for school. So I'm going to be pretty open after that. And for me, like, just spending time with you this evening and sharing your information with not only myself, but everyone else out there with their listening ears on, it's been amazing. It's been an awesome night. Even though I lost you for a minute, I was like, oh my gosh, where'd you go? You kept popping up and disappearing. I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. But how exactly did you two get together, you and Myke?
We were in a small denomination, and we were both directors of youth ministries from our respective conferences. Myke from the Pacific Northwest, and I was from New York. We were invited to come to a national leaders meeting in Indiana. And we came into a small facility owned by the denomination at virtually the same moment. Our planes landed. We got taxis over to the facility, and we walked in about the same time. There was some poor girl who was trying to check everybody in at the same time, and so we backed off and sat down on a couple of seats next to each other. And just chatting. We'd never met each other before. This is back in 1986. And we're getting ready for this nationwide conference of youth leaders. And we're just jawboning and talking about where we're from. And one of the bishops of the denomination came through the lobby, and he had his suit on and his necktie open and no jacket on, and he was riled. He was really agitated. And he walked up to look for the girl who was supposed to be checking everybody in. She wasn't there. She had stepped away from the counter. And he turns around, and we could just tell he was flustered. And he goes, "Where's the girl supposed to be here? Where's the girl?" And somebody said she stepped away from the desk. He goes, "I locked myself out of my room. I've got to find somebody with a key to get me in." So he storms off. So I got up, I have certain skills that came out of my pre-Christian environment. And
I have
took
a certain
his credit
set of
card
skills.
And I slip-locked his door. I slip-locked his door.
Oh my goodness.
And unlocked it from the inside and left his door ajar. And then I went back and sat next to Myke Wilson. And the bishop came back in, and he's still flustered. He couldn't find anybody to unlock his door. And I called him by name, and I said, Bishop, your door is open. This is an old hotel, and the doors don't always shut real tightly. I just went up and wiggled the handle, and your door is open for you.
Oh, wow.
And he said, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Went up to get his suit coat and everything. Myke Wilson turns to me. We're sitting right next to each other and goes, how did you do that? And I said, don't ask questions that you don't want answers to.
Right. I'm surprised he didn't turn around and say, what sort of sorcery is this?
No, we started laughing. And to this day, it's been 35 years, we don't remember. But one of us said, in those seats, we're going to be best friends for life. And we have been best friends for life.
That is an awesome story. I want to thank you so much once again for being my guest tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies, Mr. Dr. Myke Merrill. It was awesome to have you, and I look forward to having you and your buddy Myke on too. Like, that is an awesome story, how you guys met, and you guys just totally colluded. But thank you again for being on. It was awesome.
I appreciate it so much. It's been wonderful talking with you.
You as well. And I want to thank all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Periscope, iHeartRadio, and wherever else beyond the Omniverse you've been listening tonight. I had a wonderful time, and I can't wait to do it next weekend when on Saturday we have the Paradox Paranormal Forum, and then on Sunday we have Mr. Bill Hauser, aka Candooey, and his Ghost Box live, as well as Mr. Chris Garcia, Psychic Chris Garcia, as Mr. Bill Hauser requests. You guys, don't forget, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better, and together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. If you guys want to join us for the Skype after party, just look me up at live TessaTNT.Thomas30 or give us a jingle jangle at 970-335-9596. Until next time, nighty night, love and light. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Please, please, please do not work too hard. Do not take anything too seriously, and be like me, fly by the seat of your pants. Until next time, take care of my yous.